A little girl arrived for a job interview. What the powerful CEO would soon discover about her completely shook him. She was there as a representative for her mother, who had been rushed to the hospital. The mirrored glass of the Lexington Enterprises headquarters gleamed beneath the bright morning sun. Standing outside, Virginia Allen adjusted the straps of her backpack and looked up at the towering skyscraper. She was only 7 years old and just under 4 feet tall. She wore a neat blue dress and a white cardigan, an outfit carefully chosen the night before by her mother. Clutching an old leather folder tightly to her chest, she whispered to herself, "I can do this," drawing strength from her small but steady voice. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she nodded with determination and stepped through the revolving doors into the massive lobby. Inside, sharply dressed professionals in suits walked briskly across the gleaming marble floors. Virginia approached the reception desk, standing on tiptoe to reach the counter. "Excuse me," she said softly, but with confidence. "I have a meeting with Mr. Charles Morgan at 9 o'clock. Ellen, the receptionist, her name printed neatly on a placard, looked up in surprise, blinking at the small visitor. "Oh, sweetheart, are you lost? Where are your parents?" she asked gently. Virginia stood tall, lifting her chin. "My mom is Rachel Allen. She has an interview today for the project manager position." She carefully placed the leather portfolio on the counter. "I'm here on her behalf." Ellen furrowed her brow, now thoroughly puzzled. "Sweetie, that's not how interviews work. Your mom has to be here herself." Virginia's voice trembled slightly. "She can't. She was taken to St. Luke's Medical Center last night because she had trouble breathing. But she really, really needs this job." Just a few steps away, a man in a charcoal black suit had been quietly listening. His name was Jonathan Talman. Not far from him stood Charles Morgan, CEO of Lexington Enterprises. Known throughout New York as a brilliant but ruthlessly disciplined leader, he was not someone who tolerated interruptions. "What's going on, Ellen?" he asked in a commanding voice. "Mr. Morgan, this little girl says she's here for her mum's interview," Ellen answered, clearly bewildered. Morgan stepped closer, his steely blue eyes fixed on Virginia. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his imposing presence could intimidate even seasoned executives. "What's your name, young lady?" he asked. "Virginia Allen, sir," she replied firmly, not breaking eye contact. Something softened in Morgan's face. "Where is your mom now?" "She's at St. Luke's," Virginia replied. "She has pneumonia, but the doctors say she might be okay in a few days." She opened the leather binder and displayed its contents. "I brought her resume and certifications. She worked all night on her presentation before she got sick." Morgan glanced at Talman, then looked back at the girl. There was something in her quiet resolve that made him pause. "Virginia Allen," he said, "I've interviewed a lot of candidates in my life, but never quite like this." He extended his hand. "Come with me to my office. Let's take a look at what your mother prepared." Ellen could only stare in disbelief as the CEO led the little girl into the executive elevator. "Sir," Virginia said softly as the elevator doors closed, "I'm not allowed to drink coffee, but I know how to make it if you'd like." Morgan chuckled, a deep, genuine laugh he hadn't let out in years. He didn't realize this strange morning would change the course of his entire life. In his office, Morgan gestured for Virginia to sit in the comfortable chair across from him. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting a golden glow on the walls, lined with awards and magazine covers featuring his face. "So, Virginia," he said, watching her open the binder with care, "tell me what your mum brings to the table." Virginia looked up at him, then back at the resume. She has over 8 years of experience managing projects. She worked at Westlake Solutions, but they shut down. Last month. She traced the lines on the paper with her finger. She has a PMP certificate and an MBA from Northwestern University. Morgan raised his eyebrows, amused and slightly taken aback by how much the child knew. Why does your mom want to work here? Because we need health insurance, Virginia replied honestly. She says your company makes things that matter to people. Morgan didn't expect that. Most applicants avoided talking about money or personal needs. They recited the usual scripts about goals and values. But Virginia was just telling the truth. My mum is really good at her job, she added, pulling out a folder containing project summaries. These are things she worked on. She kept going even when she started feeling sick. Morgan looked through the neatly organized documents. He was genuinely impressed by Rachel Allen's track record. Who's taking care of you while she's in the hospital? He asked. Virginia hesitated. Mrs. Winters, our neighbor, watched me this morning, but she's really old. I can take care of myself. I pack my own lunch for school. Something heavy settled in Morgan's chest. And your father? He asked gently. He left when I was a baby. My mum says he wasn't ready to be a dad, Virginia said plainly, like she was stating the weather. It's just me and Mom now, but we're good at being a team. Morgan studied the girl, amazed by her calmness and clarity. She carried herself like someone much older, someone with responsibilities most children never even think about. Her strength stirred something long buried inside him. Hold on, he said, pressing the intercom on his desk. Janet, cancel all my morning appointments. His assistant's voice echoed through the speaker, startled. Sir, you're scheduled to present to the board at 11. Reschedule it, he said, without hesitation. And find out who's caring for Rachel Allen at St. Luke's, Virginia, smiled in surprise. You're going to see my mum? She asked quietly. Yes, we're going together, Morgan said as he rose from his seat. I want to meet the woman who raised such an incredible representative. As the elevator descended, Virginia looked up at him with curiosity. Mr. Morgan, why are you doing all this for us? My mom says important people don't usually help. Her question hit harder than he expected. He'd built a career on productivity and precision, not compassion. Why was he doing this? Let's just say, he replied with a faint smile, you managed to do something none of my senior staff have ever done. You got my full attention. Virginia smiled back, her front teeth missing. Without hesitation, she slipped her small hand into his. The simple gesture of trust surprised Morgan. Neither of them knew that this moment would mark the beginning of healing for wounds they didn't yet know they carried. The lobby of St. Luke's Medical Center was full of life. Nurses hurried by, equipment beeped steadily, and announcements echoed through the halls. Morgan, in his finely tailored suit, stood out among the hospital scrubs, yet he moved through the corridors with the same confidence and authority he brought to board meetings. The nurse at the front desk tapped a few keys. Room 317, she said. But visiting hours haven't... She stopped when Morgan slid his business card across the counter. I need to speak to Ms. Allen about something important, he said firmly. Virginia led him through the hallway like she knew it well. How many times had she walked these halls alone? Inside room 317, Rachel Allen lay propped up in bed. Her face was pale, her light brown hair tied back messily. Several fourth lines ran beside her. Despite the illness, it was clear she was Virginia's mother. Virginia? She asked weakly. What are you doing here? You should be home with Mrs. Simmons. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw Morgan. Oh my God, Mom, this is Mr. Morgan, Virginia said proudly. I went to your interview. He brought me here to see you. The color drained from Rachel's face. You did what? She whispered, mortified. Morgan stepped forward and gently explained. Ms. Allen, your daughter is an extraordinary representative. She showed me your portfolio with remarkable confidence. I'm so sorry, Rachel stammered, struggling to sit up, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. We talked about this, Virginia. You were supposed to call the company, not go there in person. But you worked so hard on it, Virginia insisted, her voice trembling, and we really need the job. A heavy silence filled the room. Morgan sat beside the bed. Ms. Allen, he said gently, your daughter mentioned you worked at Westlake until recently. Rachel nodded, trying to make sense of what was happening. I stayed 5 years, even through the acquisition and layoffs. I reviewed your materials. Your background is impressive, he said, watching her closely. Why haven't you landed another position with your qualifications? Rachel glanced at Virginia before answering. It's not that simple. I'm a single mum, no nearby family to help. That's a red flag for a lot of companies. She took a deep breath, her voice growing steadier. They don't say it directly, but I know what they're thinking. What if your child gets sick? I've been to 8 interviews in 2 months, 8 rejections. Morgan noticed Virginia climb onto the bed next to her mother. She instinctively checked the IV line, like she'd done it before. That small act said a lot. This wasn't their first time dealing with illness. Rachel's voice dropped. And with medical bills, pneumonia came at the worst time. Morgan remembered his own mother, fighting alone, making hard choices to take care of him. He hadn't thought about that in years. Ms. Allen, he said slowly, deciding, how soon do you think you'll be fully recovered? The doctor said I might be discharged tomorrow if things improve, she replied, but I'll probably need about a week to be fully back on my feet. In that case, we'll schedule your formal interview for next Monday. He pulled a sleek business card from his wallet. And give this number to the billing office. Lexington will cover the medical expenses. Rachel stared at the card in disbelief. Mr. Morgan, I don't think I can accept this. Think of it as an advance, he said. At Lexington, we take care of our people. As they left the room, Virginia whispered, Thank you for helping my mom. Those simple words meant more to Charles Morgan than any deal he'd ever closed. Over the next 5 days, Virginia became a regular presence at Lexington Enterprises, with Rachel's permission and after Morgan arranged for transportation and someone to supervise. Virginia spent her afternoons in a quiet corner near the executive suite. She did her homework there, sometimes exploring different departments. On Wednesday, while working on a math assignment, she looked up and said, You could make more money if you fixed your supply chain. Morgan, passing by, paused. How so? Virginia pointed at her notes. Your operating margins would improve if you organized how materials are delivered. It's just basic math. He stared at her, speechless. It was the second time that week she'd caught him off guard. He couldn't help but smile. Is that so? And where did you learn about operating margins? Virginia tapped her pencil between her fingers. From my mum. She talks about work with me. She says it helps her think things through better. She flipped her notebook. And your receptionist, Ellen, gives me business magazines when I'm bored. Morgan chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. Most kids your age read comics. I read those too, Virginia replied quickly. Batman's my favorite. He helps people even though he doesn't have superpowers. That made Morgan laugh out loud. By Friday, subtle changes had crept into his routine. His executive assistant, Janet, who had worked with him for 15 years, noticed. You keep checking the time before Virginia arrives, she said, placing budget files on his desk. Morgan paused. She's just smart, that's all. If you say so, Janet replied, sensing something more. She had worked with him long enough to catch those rare flickers of emotion. The board's asking questions about all the appointments you've cancelled, she added. They can ask me directly, he said flatly. Later that day, Morgan walked into the break room and found Virginia surrounded by the marketing team. They were clearly charmed by her. If you make the colors brighter, she said confidently, kids my age would like the ad more. The marketing director scribbled notes. Morgan smiled. Miss Allen, he called out, time for your appointment. It had become their daily ritual, discussing her mum's recovery and what Virginia had learned at Lexington that day. In the office, Virginia sat in her usual chair. Mum's coming home tomorrow, she said, as she settled in. The nurse said her lungs sound better now. That's great, Morgan said, sliding a chocolate milk across the table, a quiet tradition between them. Virginia drank, then looked at him seriously. Will you still want to see me once Mum starts working here? Morgan was caught off guard. Why wouldn't I? She shrugged, staring at her drink. Sometimes people don't like kids around. That's what my dad did. The words hit him harder than anything. Virginia, he said softly, some people leave because of their own shortcomings. That's not the child's fault. He hadn't expected to say it, but something shifted inside him. Almost unconsciously, he opened a drawer and pulled out a framed photo, one that hadn't seen the light of day in nearly 2 decades. This is my daughter, he said, showing it to her. Her name was Lily. Virginia stared at the picture, a girl with twinkling eyes, just like Morgan's. Is she gone? She asked. Morgan's voice lowered, distant. She and her mum died in a car accident, a long time ago. Virginia turned to him. Is that why you sometimes look sad when you see me? It was an honest, pure, and dangerous question, like a mirror. Morgan's answer was steady. Number, that's not true. The next day, Friday, Victoria Sloan, Director of Human Resources at Lexington, stood in Morgan's office, arms crossed. I've reviewed Rachel Allen's application, she began. Her experience is solid, but there are concerns about her personal situation. Morgan continued scanning documents, his expression unchanged. Single mother, no nearby family, recent health issues, Victoria listed, tapping her manicured fingers. She's missed work before due to childcare. Statistically, it's high risk. Morgan set his pen down. Did you read her performance reviews? Yes, Victoria admitted. She's always performed well, but we have other candidates with fewer complications. Complications? Morgan's voice turned cold. You mean a talented, dependable woman raising a bright, resilient daughter? That's what you're calling a complication? Victoria shifted in place, clearly uncomfortable. Charles, this isn't like you. People are questioning your judgment. There are rumors. I don't deal in rumors, he replied sharply. I deal in results. He picked up Rachel's portfolio. She saved Westlake $3 million through her process improvements. That's what matters. That same afternoon, Mario Torres, Lexington's CFO and Morgan's longtime friend, walked in quietly. Charles, we need to talk. If this is about Rachel Allen. It is, Mario interrupted, taking the seat across from him. But not for the reason you think. He studied Morgan carefully. This isn't just about hiring a qualified project manager, is it? Morgan clenched his jaw. Her qualifications are solid. I've known you 30 years, Mario said gently. I haven't seen you like this since Caroline and Lily passed. Don't, Morgan warned. Mario continued. You've spent years building walls so high the board calls you the machine behind your back. Then this girl walks into your life, and suddenly you're canceling high-level meetings and paying hospital bills for someone you just met. He paused. What's your point? My point is, Mario leaned in slightly. You need to be careful, not just as CEO, but as a man. If what you're feeling is tied to ghosts of the past, you're moving from a place of vulnerability. Morgan looked out the window toward the Manhattan skyline. Did you know Virginia's been packing her own school lunch since she was 5? He said quietly. She tracks her mum's medications. She understands hospital billing systems. She's 7, Mario. Mario's voice dropped, and Lily would have been 9 this year. The silence between them was its own answer. After Mario left, Morgan sat at his desk and slowly opened the drawer. He took out the silver-framed photo, Caroline smiling, cradling toddler Lily, and stared at it. What would you think of all this, Caroline? He whispered. Am I chasing ghosts, or finally doing the right thing? The photo didn't answer. It simply reminded him of what he'd lost, and how deeply that loss had shaped him. His intercom buzzed. Sir, Janet said, Rachel Allen is here. She was discharged this morning and asked to speak with you. Morgan carefully returned the frame to the drawer. Send her in. Whatever happened next would determine whether his team's concerns were justified, or if something truly meaningful was beginning. Rachel Allen entered the office looking stronger than she had in the hospital. Though her face still showed signs of fatigue, she wore a navy suit, simple, clean, a little worn, but clearly her best. Mr. Morgan, she began, her voice steady despite the nerves. I wanted to thank you in person for everything you've done for Virginia, and for covering the hospital expenses. I'll repay you. I promise. Morgan gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit down, and there's no need to repay. Think of it as an investment. Rachel sat, her back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Investments usually expect a return. I haven't proven mine yet. Morgan smiled faintly. Your daughter already has. The marketing team accepted one of her color ideas, and the kitchen staff now keeps chocolate milk stocked because of her. Rachel smiled softly. That's Virginia. She connects with people easily. But then her expression turned serious again. I also owe you an apology. She shouldn't have gone to that interview. I told her just to call. I never imagined she'd go in person. Morgan shrugged. Yet here we are. Sometimes the best opportunities come when the rules are broken. He paused, then leaned forward slightly. Your formal interview is Monday, but right now I want to talk about something else. Rachel's posture stiffened. Of course. What is it? You keep applying to corporate roles even though you've faced a lot of rejection because of your family situation. Her jaw tightened. She hesitated, then spoke with conviction. Because I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that being a mother diminishes a woman's capability. I'm good at what I do. That doesn't change because of my personal life. She took a breath. And to be honest, she came in because we need reliable health insurance, more than a good company culture or team outings. Morgan nodded slowly. That's practical. I respect that. He turned slightly. And if we hire you, how will you handle emergencies? School closures? If Virginia gets sick again? Rachel didn't hesitate. I've faced that before, and I'll face it again. I have 3 trusted babysitters, 2 after-school programs, and a network of parents who help each other. I've planned for all of it. Her gaze remained steady. I know the concerns employers have. I've heard them all. But what most don't understand is that single parents, we're the most efficient workers you'll ever hire. We don't gossip. We don't waste time. We run full speed because we have to. Morgan looked at her with admiration. Then, quietly and firmly, he made a decision that would reshape his company. Ms. Allen, I'd like to offer you the position, with one unique addition to your benefits package. He handed her a folder. Inside was a draft of a new pilot initiative. Rachel opened it and read slowly. Her eyes widened. Emergency childcare support. Flexible hours for parents. Yes, Morgan said softly. A program for employees with family responsibilities. You're doing this because of me? She asked, stunned. No, he said, calm but purposeful. I'm doing it because few years ago, my wife Caroline tried to return to work after having our daughter, Lily. Every company she spoke to saw her as a burden instead of the remarkable woman she was. He looked directly into Rachel's eyes. I'll never make that mistake again. A quiet stillness settled in the room. The truth hung heavy, like dust in the air. What happened? Rachel asked gently. Morgan's expression darkened. She was driving to yet another job interview when a truck swerved into her lane. She never made it. He looked away. Sometimes, when I look at Virginia, I see who Lily might have become. Rachel's eyes softened with understanding. So that's why you helped us. Maybe at first, he admitted, but your daughter's courage and your talent are more than enough reason on their own. He extended his hand. The offer still stands. The position is yours, if you want it. Rachel reached out and shook his hand. In that moment, neither of them knew how deeply this decision would change their futures, and the futures of many others at Lexington Enterprises. 2 months later, things had quietly shifted at Lexington Enterprises. Rachel Allen had already made a strong impact. Her expertise in project management brought structure and efficiency to multiple teams. The flexible work pilot, originally designed with her in mind, had expanded. 5 additional employees had joined what Morgan now called the Family Forward Initiative. Our productivity reports show a 4% increase among employees enrolled, Rachel reported during the quarterly executive meeting. She stood confidently at the front of the room, data charts glowing behind her. Employee retention is up, and sick leave cases are down. From her seat, Victoria Sloan, the HR director, watched with a hint of skepticism. 2 months isn't enough to draw firm conclusions, she said. What happens when the initial enthusiasm fades? That's why we're monitoring it weekly, Rachel replied smoothly. It allows us to course-correct issues before they escalate. Morgan watched her with quiet pride. Not only was she exceptional at her work, but she had learned to navigate executive tension with grace and precision. The program will continue, Morgan said, ending further debate. Rachel, prepare to scale the initiative, add another full-time position before next quarter. That afternoon, Morgan spotted Virginia in her favorite spot, a small desk in the corner of Rachel's office. She was deep in her science homework, brow furrowed in concentration. At first, some had raised eyebrows, but Morgan had made it clear. Lexington welcomed employees' children in designated areas when necessary. Mr. Morgan, Virginia greeted him cheerfully. Mom's helping Mr. Davidson fix the supply problem. So I've heard, Morgan chuckled. She's impressive. She always has been, Virginia replied without hesitation. A kind of light filled Morgan at that simple observation. So many talented professionals had gone unnoticed simply because they didn't fit the expected mold. Virginia, he said, sitting beside her, would you like to help me with a special project? Her eyes lit up. What kind of project? I'm thinking of creating a center for kids, a study and activity space for when their parents need to work late. What do you think it should have to make it great for kids like you? Virginia thought carefully. Books at different levels, quiet areas but also tables for groups, healthy snacks, not just cookies, though cookies are great, and maybe college students who help with homework. Morgan began jotting notes, and so, during that break from school, the CEO and a 7-year-old girl brainstormed what would soon become the Bridge Program, a groundbreaking on-site childcare and academic support center that would go on to inspire similar efforts across the country. That evening, Rachel returned to her office and found her daughter and her boss surrounded by colorful sketches, sticky notes, and half-finished charts. "Should I be worried about this little conspiracy?" she teased. "Mom, we're designing a space for kids at Lexington." Virginia beamed. Rachel looked at Morgan, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds expensive." "It's not a cost," he replied. "It's an investment, and it will pay off." As they walked toward the elevator, Rachel studied him carefully. "You've changed since the day we first met." "For better or worse?" he asked. She smiled. "Better, of course. People don't call you the machine anymore." Morgan closed his eyes briefly. "You heard that?" "News travels fast around the office," she teased. "Don't worry. Now they call you the revolutionary." As the elevator doors closed, Morgan thought about something. Not all revolutions begin with bold speeches or shareholder pressure. Sometimes they start with a small, honest question from a child. Why can't things be different? But not everyone at Lexington welcomed the changes. The quiet transformation of the company caught the attention of those comfortable with the old way of doing things, and they would not allow the new vision to spread without resistance. The next quarterly board meeting began like any other. Updates, forecasts, routine metrics. Charles Morgan sat at the head of the table as Mario Torres, the CFO, presented the numbers. "Revenue is up 7% year over year," Mario announced. "More importantly, departments involved in the Family Forward initiative have shown a 22% increase in productivity." Several board members nodded in approval, but the expected pushback came. Gerald Harrington, the oldest member and former CEO, cleared his throat. His voice was deep, heavy with decades of authority. "These numbers are impressive," he said carefully, "but I've been hearing concerns about the changes happening to the company culture." He looked around. "There's a growing impression that we're becoming more like a daycare center than a top-tier financial institution." Morgan's face remained unreadable. "Could you clarify that?" "Children in the office, flexible hours, remote work," Harrington listed. "These may appeal to younger employees, but our core clients expect stability and formality." Victoria Sloan added, "Senior staff are beginning to complain." She continued, "Just yesterday, someone saw a junior analyst playing catch with a child in the East Corridor." "That child was mine," Morgan said calmly, "and the game was a multiplication exercise I created to help her learn math." The room went still. "Charles," Harrington said in a more measured, fatherly tone, "no one is questioning your right to launch new programs. But there is concern about how emotionally invested you've become in the Allen case. It's affecting how people perceive your decisions." Morgan felt that old chill creeping back in, the emotional armor he had worn for so many years before Rachel and Virginia entered his life. "My personal investment is irrelevant," he said firmly. "The numbers speak for themselves. If shareholder value is our guiding principle, then this initiative is justified." The tension in the room eased slightly, but Morgan knew this was only the beginning of a much larger and messier battle. After the meeting, Mario stayed behind. "Victoria's documenting every minor incident involving kids, every tiny delay from flexible workers," Morgan replied flatly. "She's building a case." "This isn't just about data anymore," Mario warned. "It's about power, about perception." Harrington still holds influence over the older board members. They see what you're doing as dismantling everything they built. Morgan gathered his papers. "Then maybe," he said quietly, "it's time for what they built to evolve." That night, instead of returning to his sleek penthouse, Morgan drove to Rachel's modest townhouse in Brooklyn. She had invited him for dinner, a simple thank you for everything he'd done for Virginia. As he entered, The contrast was clear. Virginia stood in the doorway, wearing an oversized apron and a huge grin. "I helped make lasagna!" The house was warm and vibrant, a little messy but full of life. Books were stacked on every surface, a half-finished science project spread across the dining table, crayon drawings framed on the walls. "Sorry for the mess," Rachel said, stepping out from the kitchen with a warm smile. "We didn't expect the science fair volcano to take over the whole house." "She explodes," Virginia said excitedly. "Want to see later?" Morgan laughed. "I'll keep a safe distance." Over dinner, something rare happened. Charles Morgan relaxed. The conversation was easy, natural. No posturing, no corporate games. Just stories about school, Virginia's dreams, and Rachel's new projects. "You're different here," Rachel observed after Virginia went off to finish her homework. "More human." He thought about that. "I've spent most of my life building a professional mask. Eventually, it stopped being a mask. It just became who I was." "A shield," Rachel said softly. "I know. I wear one too. Single mums in corporate America don't get to drop it." Her words hit deeper than expected, something both comforting and unsettling. "There's pushback from the board," he admitted. "They're using you and Virginia to question my objectivity." Rachel's face grew serious. "If you think it helps, I can transfer departments, step back from the initiative." "No," Morgan said firmly. "That would only validate their narrative. We stay the course." What he didn't say was how painful it was to imagine not seeing Rachel and Virginia every day. "Just be ready," he warned. "It might get messy." Rachel offered a calm but determined smile. "Charles, I've been a single mom for 7 years. Nothing's messier than that." As he drove home, Morgan realized something disturbing. He had shared more with Rachel than with anyone in his company, and the idea of losing her and Virginia from his daily life caused something deeper than fear. It was grief. Was it really just politics, or was something else at stake? The answer came sooner than expected. The next morning, Janet entered his office with urgency in her eyes. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet. On the front page of the Wall Street Journal's business section was the headline, "Personal Crusade of Lexington." CEO, Innovation or Midlife Crisis. The article was brutal. It cited anonymous employees, describing Morgan's emotional involvement with a female subordinate and her daughter. It suggested that his decisions stemmed from unresolved trauma rather than business acumen. It framed the Family Forward initiative as a costly deviation, not a strategy, but a passion project. "Who leaked this?" Morgan asked, his voice low and tight. "Not sure," Janet replied carefully, "but only a handful had access to details about your wife and daughter." The calls started before noon. Board members, major clients, industry contacts, all looking for answers. Lexington's stock had dropped 3 points. The PR team was in full damage control. Then Victoria Sloan arrived at his office door. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes betrayed concern. "The board has called an emergency session for 4 p.m., she said. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "And they've requested your presence," she added, "and also Rachel Allen's." Morgan's voice turned sharp. "On what grounds?" "No details provided," Victoria replied smoothly. "I'm just the messenger." After she left, Morgan immediately called Rachel. "I've seen it," she said, her tone clipped. "Virginia's teacher called. Parents are already whispering." He heard her switch to a first-name tone he hadn't expected. "Charles, I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," he said softly, "but it doesn't matter what we meant when my 7-year-old daughter is hearing rumors about her mother and her boss." The word struck Morgan like a punch. "It's not said in the article, not in words," Rachel continued, "but we know how this works." That afternoon, they arrived separately at the boardroom. The air was cold. Harrington stood at the center of the long table, with Victoria and several conservative board members flanking him. Mario Torres sat alone at the other end, a silent show of loyalty. "Let's get to the point," Harrington began, without greeting. "This morning's article has damaged our reputation and shaken shareholder confidence. Clients and investors are asking questions." Morgan remained calm. He'd weathered media storms before. "Our communications team is already working on clarification." "It's not just the article," Victoria interjected. "It's what the article implies, that personal interests are influencing corporate decisions." She turned to Rachel. "Ms. Allen, your credentials aren't in doubt, but the circumstances of your hiring and the rapid cultural shifts raise issues of perception." Rachel stood tall. "Which part of my situation is the threat? Being a single mother, or my child showing initiative to make sure I didn't miss an opportunity?" Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "The concern," Harrington said heavily, "is the appearance of favoritism and the swift rollout of policies without thorough board review." He slid a folder toward Morgan. "We recommend suspending the Family Forward Initiative pending full review and relocating Ms. Allen to our Cleveland office to avoid further issues." Morgan didn't move to pick up the folder. "That would constitute constructive dismissal," he said. "Her child is enrolled in school here. Her life is here." "We're offering relocation support," Victoria added, her voice carefully rehearsed. Rachel's voice cut through. "Before we go further, who leaked Mr. Morgan's personal history to the media?" Silence. "That's irrelevant," Harrington said firmly. "I disagree," Rachel replied. "It reflects on the ethics of this board. Someone used private information for political leverage. That matters." Mario spoke for the first time. "I supported Ms. Allen's hiring. Before we discuss suspension or relocation, we need to address the actual breach that triggered this crisis." Victoria's confidence faltered. "There's no evidence any board member—" "There is," Morgan interrupted. He motioned for Janet, who entered and handed out copies of an email chain. "This morning, IT traced the leak. The message, including private family details, was sent from Victoria Sloan's email account to a journalist at the Wall Street Journal 3 days ago." All eyes turned to Victoria. Her face turned pale. "That's impossible," she stammered. "Maybe I was hacked." "Someone with your credentials, your access, and direct control over HR files?" Morgan asked coolly. "Unlikely." It was the first time since the meeting began that Morgan allowed himself a small smile. "I knew someone would try this. I just didn't expect it this fast." He held up the report. "This includes metadata confirming the account and source." His voice hardened. "Victoria Sloan, you are hereby terminated. Security will escort you as you clear your office." Harrington stood abruptly, furious. "You can't dismiss an executive without board approval." "Actually," Morgan said, still calm, "ethical violations and breaches of confidentiality fall under my direct authority. Unless you're involved as well, Gerald?" The older man hesitated, visibly shaken. "Of course not. I'd never—" "Good," Morgan said firmly. "As acting chairman, I propose we end this emergency session and reconvene tomorrow. Give everyone time to review the evidence." One by one, the board members stood, some stunned, some hiding satisfaction behind neutral expressions. A few quietly celebrated Victoria's fall. As the room emptied, Rachel remained seated. "You knew this could happen?" she said softly, once they were alone. Morgan nodded slowly. "I suspected Victoria would pull something eventually. She's resisted every progressive policy I've proposed for years. But this wasn't just about you. Why didn't you warn me? Rachel asked, her voice touched with hurt. Your reaction had to be real, Morgan said quietly. Otherwise, people might believe we conspired. He paused. But I didn't anticipate how deeply it would affect Virginia. That's my fault. I'm sorry. Rachel stood, collecting her documents. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, I believe in what you're doing. Building a company that lets people have both a career and a family. It matters. It's long overdue. When the door closed behind her, Morgan sat back. He had won the battle, but the personal trust that may have been bruised left the victory feeling more hollow than expected. 3 weeks passed. Victoria's dismissal quieted the controversy. Lexington's stock rebounded. The media moved on. More importantly, the Family Forward initiative not only survived, it expanded. 25 employees across departments were now enrolled. Rachel Allen led the expansion with precision and clarity, backed by metrics. Productivity rose. Employee satisfaction improved. Even previous skeptics on the board began to acknowledge the program's benefits. Competing firms began scrambling to replicate what Lexington had started. But just as normalcy seemed to return, Gerald Harrington arrived unannounced in Morgan's office. He closed the door behind him, his expression serious. We need to talk, Charles, about your future at Lexington. Morgan sat slowly. I didn't realize my future was being discussed. Harrington placed a thick folder on the desk between them. The board is reviewing our leadership structure and succession planning, he said. Routine, of course. Morgan opened the folder. It wasn't routine. It contained a detailed proposal. Over the next 6 months, Morgan would transition to an advisory role. Harrington would return as interim CEO. A formal search for new leadership would begin immediately. I see, Morgan said quietly. You've done great work, Harrington added. Under your leadership, Lexington grew. But perhaps it's time. Time for what? Morgan cut in. To leave? To dismantle everything I built just when it started to matter? This is about balance, Harrington said. We need to ensure your personal healing doesn't redirect the company's identity. The words landed like blades beneath Morgan's armor. My personal life doesn't matter, he said coldly. The numbers speak for themselves. The numbers don't tell the whole story, Harrington replied. Culture matters. Tradition matters. Our legacy clients expect consistency. He paused. And your relationship with the Allens? I have no relationship with them, Morgan said. Even to himself, the words felt empty. Don't you? Harrington asked quietly. You're seen at school events, dining at their home. You created a major policy initiative that began with one specific employee. I supported a talented worker, Morgan said, and I saw an opportunity to improve work standards for all. But your involvement is personal. Harrington stared at him. The board meets Friday at 2 p.m. You have until then to consider this, but if you refuse, it will get messy. The media will dig into your past, your connection to Rachel Allen and her daughter. As Harrington left, Morgan remained still. He could fight. He had allies and data on his side. But Harrington was right about one thing. A public war would drag Rachel and Virginia back into the storm. He was deep in thought when a soft knock came at the door. It creaked open, and a small face peeked in. Mr. Morgan? Virginia asked quietly. Mum said I could show you my science fair project. She bounced in, holding a blue ribbon and a stack of photos. Her volcano had been the star. For the next 5 minutes, Morgan listened in silence as Virginia excitedly explained her experiment, chemical reactions, and the baking soda explosion. Her eyes lit with joy, words spilling faster than her breath. Then she paused, serious now. What would happen if you didn't work at Lexington anymore? Morgan looked at her gently. I might go to a different company, or maybe start something new. Would we still see you? She asked. Mom says you're her mentor, but I think you're our friend too. The question struck like lightning. Every choice he had delayed, every reason he had used to stay quiet, suddenly made clear. The title, the company, the reputation he'd spent decades building, none of it felt as important as this child, her mother, and the connection they had built together. Yes, he said, his voice clear and firm. You'll still see me. I promised that evening. He called Rachel. I need to talk to you. Can we meet tomorrow? Is this about Harrington's ultimatum? She asked, surprising him. You knew? Thin walls on the executive floor, she said. And Janet's been dropping hints. She's protective. Morgan smiled, even though he didn't want to. You're the last to know there's a coup in the palace, she teased. Not a coup yet, he replied, but a reckoning maybe. She paused. Whatever you're planning, don't make it about protecting us. Virginia and I, we've weathered worse. It's not just about protection, he said softly. It's about what matters most now. Whether I cling to what I've always known, or finally choose to build something right. A pause followed, uncertain but hopeful. Come to dinner tomorrow, she said at last. Virginia's making spaghetti, her famous recipe. We'll talk after she goes to bed. When the call ended, Morgan realized something deeply true. For the first time since losing Caroline and Lily, he was making decisions, not from guilt, but from hope. At last, he was facing forward. The next morning at exactly 10 a.m., a courier arrived at Morgan's office with a large envelope marked Personal and Confidential. Janet placed it on his desk with a curious glance, but, as always, she didn't ask questions. It was one of the reasons Morgan trusted her completely. He opened the envelope and found documents, board meeting records, internal memos, personnel files nearly 2 decades old. Attached was a yellow sticky note with a handwritten message. You need to know what you're really up against. A friend. As he sifted through the contents, his hands began to tremble. The documents revealed a policy, implemented under Harrington's leadership, that quietly targeted women of childbearing age, especially those with children. It wasn't explicit, but the intent was unmistakable. One memo from Harrington to the then HR director read, "While direct discrimination is legally risky, we can apply evaluation standards that naturally filter out candidates with family responsibilities. This will ensure a more focused and committed workforce." Another document listed pregnant employees. Next to each name were notes about when they left the company. Nearly all had resigned within a month of returning from maternity leave. Then Morgan found something more personal. A board presentation from 20 years ago referenced his wife, Caroline, described not by name, but as the spouse of CFO Charles Morgan, who had requested part-time return from maternity leave. The note suggested denying the request to avoid setting a precedent for other executive spouses. He shut his eyes, overwhelmed. A wave of old memories rushed back. Caroline's disappointment when no company welcomed her return, the months she spent submitting proposals for flexible work schedules, the growing strain between them when he suggested she stay home like the other executives' wives. Then came the final page, a newspaper clipping of the car accident that claimed Caroline and Lily's lives. In the margin, a handwritten note, clearly Harrington's, read, "Tragic. Keep Morgan focused. Grief is the best distraction." Morgan sat frozen, gripped by a mixture of grief and rage so intense it felt physical. For years he had blamed himself, for not supporting Caroline enough, for letting her face the battle alone. But the deeper truth was even worse. Harrington hadn't just dismissed Caroline's efforts, he had orchestrated her professional erasure. That evening, when Rachel arrived at his office, Morgan's voice was low. There's something I need to show you. An hour later, Rachel sat across from him, eyes wide as she read the documents spread across the table. Her fingers trembled as they traced the words. This, she whispered, this was a system designed to push out women like me, like Caroline. Morgan nodded slowly. All under the guise of performance and culture. Rachel's voice cracked, not from fear, but fury. This isn't just policy, it's a legacy of quiet, strategic erasure. Morgan looked at her. And Harrington was behind all of it. She blinked, stunned. That's why this has felt so personal. The initiative, the policies, your conviction. It's not just about fairness, is it? No, Morgan said quietly. It's about redemption, fixing something I didn't even realize I was complicit in until today. She was silent for a moment, then gently placed her hand on his. Intentional, steady. Charles, she said softly, this changes everything. These documents need to be seen. Morgan shook his head. Harrington's still here. His allies will call it old history, say it doesn't reflect the company now. Then we don't just show the board, Rachel said. We show everyone. He looked at her. What do you mean? Transparency, she said firmly. Full, unapologetic transparency. We publish it, acknowledge the past, show how we're changing it. Morgan paused. That's never been done. That's why it matters, Rachel replied. No company admits to this unless forced, but if we do it voluntarily, we won't look weak, we'll look brave, forward-thinking. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation turned strategic. They began outlining a plan, and as Morgan listened, not just to Rachel's intellect, but to the courage in her voice, he realized something profound. This wasn't about revenge. This was about building something better, and it wasn't just going to impact the boardroom. It would change everything he thought he knew about the last 17 years of his life. That's not just going to affect the board meeting, Morgan said, setting down the documents they'd gathered. This changes everything I thought I knew about the last 17 years of my life. Rachel looked at him carefully. And what are you going to do with that realization? I don't know yet, he admitted, but for the first time since Caroline and Lily, I think I'm finally walking the path she would have wanted me to take. That night, Morgan visited Rachel's home, where Virginia proudly served her famous spaghetti, slightly overcooked garlic bread included. He sat at their small kitchen table, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the crumbs of a joyful day. And he understood. This was what he had denied himself for nearly 2 decades. This was the world he'd built walls to keep out. After Virginia went to bed, Rachel poured them each a glass of wine, joining him out on the balcony. The quiet park below was lit softly by the street lamps. Tomorrow's going to be hard, she said. Harrington won't go quietly. I'm ready, Morgan replied. What I'm not ready for is what comes after. He turned to her. For 17 years, I defined myself by what I lost, and by the empire I built to bury that loss. Lexington was everything, because I had nothing else. He paused. But these past few months, with you and Virginia, I've started to remember that there's another way to measure a life, another kind of success. Rachel looked at him with quiet tenderness. No matter what happens at Lexington, she said, you've already changed lives. You've already made a difference. He nodded. That matters. But now I'm beginning to believe that being present for the people right in front of you, that might be the most important thing of all. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of unspoken truths, possibilities they weren't quite ready to name, but couldn't ignore. Rachel gently shifted the conversation. Let's handle tomorrow first, one battle at a time. Morgan smiled and stood to leave. Just then, a small shadow appeared in the hallway. Virginia, in her pajamas, holding an empty water glass. Mr. Morgan? She asked with wide, honest eyes. Are you okay? You look worried. Morgan knelt to meet her gaze. I'm a little nervous, he admitted. I have a big meeting tomorrow, but you and your mom, you make me braver. Virginia nodded seriously. Mom says when you're scared of something big, wait until morning. Everything looks different then. Morgan chuckled softly. Your mom's a wise woman. Yep, Virginia said proudly. Then she leaned in and whispered, She likes you. I can tell. She smiles more when you're around. Rachel hurried over, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Bed, now. But Morgan didn't laugh. He simply watched as they walked down the hallway together, something stirring in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The next day, when Charles Morgan stepped into the boardroom at Lexington Enterprises, he wasn't the same man who had once ruled it with icy precision and relentless ambition. Now, he was someone ready not just to defend what was right, but to fight for the future he finally believed he deserved. When Charles Morgan entered the boardroom of Lexington Enterprises the following morning, the air was heavy with anticipation. But he was calm. In front of each board member sat a folder, undeniable documentation, years of calculated discrimination, a coldly orchestrated system designed to push working mothers out of the company. Morgan stood at the head of the table. His voice was steady but laced with emotion. For 17 years, he began, I believed I had failed my wife, Caroline, that I was too focused on building this company to truly support her. But today, I've discovered that the real failure wasn't just mine. He turned to Gerald Harrington, who sat pale and silent. It was systemic and deliberate. One by one, Morgan presented the memos, policies, and timelines, each piece exposing decisions made during Harrington's leadership. These aren't outdated beliefs, Morgan said. They were decisions, executed, enforced, carried out in this room. It was a different time, Harrington muttered, voice faint. Was it? Came Rachel's voice as she stepped forward to stand beside Morgan. Or did you just make sure that time never changed? She handed out current data reports. The Family Forward Initiative hasn't slowed productivity, it's increased it. Supporting working families isn't a liability, it's a strategy. Mario Torres spoke next. I propose we make the Family Forward Initiative permanent and expand it across all Lexington locations. I second that, added Martina Chen, breaking her usual silence. And I propose we remove Gerald Harrington from the board, effective immediately. Harrington shot up. This is outrageous. I built this company. With exclusion and bias, Morgan interrupted, and now that's over. The vote was decisive, 11 in favor, 3 against. Security quietly escorted Harrington from the room. As the door closed behind him, Morgan felt something lift, not just the threat to his leadership, but the weight of guilt he had carried for so long. Later that afternoon, as news spread, Lexington Enterprises became a national leader in family-inclusive workplace policy. The company's bold actions made headlines across the financial world. Morgan stood alone in his office, holding the framed photo of Caroline and Lily. This time there was no sorrow in his expression, only clarity. I think you'd be proud, he whispered. It took me too long, but maybe something good finally came from all the pain. A knock pulled him from his thoughts. At the door stood Rachel, with Virginia beside her. We brought cupcakes, Virginia beamed, raising a bakery box. Mom said you won the big fight. Morgan smiled. We all did. As Virginia set the cupcakes neatly on the conference table, Rachel joined Morgan at the window. What happens now? She asked. Professionally, he replied, we take the initiative to the industry. 3 competitors already reached out, asking for help to launch similar programs. He looked at her, Personally, that's harder to answer. Is it? Rachel asked, steady and unflinching. Morgan inhaled slowly. For 17 years, I used Lexington to fill the space where my family used to be. But then you and Virginia came along, and I realized success isn't about monuments to the past. It's about building something meaningful with the people right in front of you. Rachel didn't answer right away. Then Morgan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This belonged to Caroline," he said. "She wanted someone like you to have it, someone who fights for what matters." Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a compass. "She used to say every woman should have her own direction," he added, "not one assigned by others, one she chooses." Rachel touched the charm, gently, visibly moved. Before she could speak, Virginia reappeared. "Are you talking serious stuff again? You look serious." Morgan knelt. "Actually, I need your help with a new project, bigger than the Kids Center." "Like what?" "I'm starting a foundation, one that helps companies build better workplaces for families. But I need a chief testing officer, someone who knows what kids really need." "I can do that," Virginia said, eyes wide with excitement. "I thought so," Morgan replied. Then he turned to Rachel. "And I need an executive director, someone who understands both corporate systems and families." Rachel blinked. "Is this real?" "Completely. We're calling it the Morgan Family Foundation." Virginia repeated the name slowly. "Morgan Family Foundation. Does that mean we're part of your family?" The question landed like a quiet thunderclap, innocent and profound. Rachel flushed. "Virginia." "Not yet," Morgan answered softly. "But there are lots of ways for a family to come together." A year later, the grand lobby of Lexington Enterprises looked very different. Banners hung from the ceiling, celebrating the launch of the Morgan Family Foundation. Executives from across industries moved through the atrium. On stage, Charles Morgan stood ready to introduce what had grown from a bold idea into a national movement. At his side stood Rachel Allen, now the foundation's executive director, composed, confident, and resolute. Nearby, Virginia, now a little taller, handed out glossy program brochures embossed with the foundation's logo in silver. "A surprise guest changed everything," Morgan told the crowd. "A child who walked into our lobby with honesty, courage, and a reminder of what really matters." He looked down at Virginia, beaming between him and Rachel. "She reminded us that family isn't a burden to business. It's our greatest strength, our truest purpose." Applause echoed through the room. As the crowd rose to their feet, Morgan reached out and took Rachel's hand. On her wrist, the silver compass bracelet glinted under the lights. Beside it, a gold ring that matched the one on his finger. He turned to her quietly. "Ready for the next chapter?" Rachel smiled and nodded as Virginia wrapped her arms around them both. "We've been ready," she said, "ever since I walked through that lobby." Because sometimes, life-changing meetings don't start in a boardroom. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come wrapped in small voices, carrying enormous courage. And sometimes, it only takes the bravery of one child to begin healing a heart that thought it would never mend. The end. Thank you all for watching. This is Mr. Hope. I love you all.